I'm Bill Kassel, and this is Free Expression. This program is all about conveying the Christian message from a Catholic point of view and defending the liberty which makes it possible to do that. We compare the perspectives underlying different religions, and we discuss a new book by a famous priest as well as a faith-based novel. Join us, sit back, and enjoy some free expression. People of different cultures and religions have always come into contact, and not always in friendly ways. In our time of instant communication, global marketing, and rapid travel, the old expression, "it's a small world," seems truer every day. The great Christian writer G.K. Chesterton pondered the differences between faith traditions in the early part of the 20th century. Matthew McKenna, a religious scholar at Ave Maria University, recently reflected on Chesterton's observations in an article for the online journal Catholic Exchange. He's here to share some of that Chestertonian insight. Matthew, thanks for being with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
I guess the issue of immigration, legal and otherwise, gives religious difference a special immediacy. Perhaps more than ever, we face the reality of people's beliefs being more than about worship. They determine how we understand life and how we should live in society. Chesterton understood that, didn't he?
He did, very much so. Immigration wasn't, exactly an issue he faced a lot of, but he did live that time when there was growing communication by written word and newspaper and magazine, but there was still a great, in a way, early social media by newspaper and stuff surged during his lifetime, which he was at the head of. So he did see a lot of interaction and dialogue between very different cultures and peoples in his own time, and that was kind of where he spent most of his life.
He really took the long view. He set it in historical perspective, and in your article you note that he set out 4 categories of religions. Perhaps you could explain that.
Chesterton's trying to find a way to basically compare different belief systems and religions and ideas and worldviews. And of course, during his time, early 20th century, there was a lot of work at comparative religion because anthropology and archaeology were very big in that time. A lot of Europeans were just traveling for the first time or first couple of years at least, to various cultures and studying different religions all around the world, especially Africa, Asia, places like that. So he was trying to cut through all the, so to speak, academic garbage, more or less what he would say, of his time to figure out actually how do we compare and contrast religions with one another, especially across history, because across history, not just today, but throughout the whole history of humanity, there's been many different religious ideas and systems. So he comes up with a way to divide religion, which gives him 4 different types. So the way he wants to divide religions and compare them is psychologically. By that, he basically means how they affect, how the religious beliefs and practices affect the person, and what it tells us about that person's outlook on life, what they're trying to get, so to speak, through the practice of religion. Does that make sense about the psychological division of religion?
Sure, yeah.
He takes that. Then he says there's four main divisions. First, you have monotheism. So there's one God. In monotheism, the person's view of God is that God is great, holy, and other, just holy. He's out there. He's really powerful, really far above us. And in antiquity, he says, Chesterton says this was basically just the Jews. They're the only ones that successfully maintained monotheism. And then the second one is paganism, or myth, pagan myth. This is what I think was the most common type of religious practice in ancient history throughout most of the world. This is stuff, the Greek gods, the Norse gods, those type of things. And in it, he says, in myth, pagan myth, you don't really believe the myths. Nobody was saying credo Zeus, like we say credo in unum deum. I believe in one God, but there was no creed. There wasn't a strong creedal faith in the pagan myths. You kind of know it's myth. In that worldview, you know God is unknown. You're aware of your ignorance about God. And so you tell stories. What might God be like? And over time, as you pass those stories on, they change. And generally, they change for the worse. And you end up with your stories about the gods being rather unflattering. And so you end up 200-300 years before Christ, you're in Greece, and most of your stories about the gods are, well, them fornicating, committing adultery. And then you have Plato and Aristotle saying, this is really dumb, actually. God can't be like this. Whatever he is, he's not like that. Then the third division Chesterton gives us is witchcraft. Witchcraft is essentially, he says, a practical outlook on life. You're trying to get something useful from the supernatural. So this would be the Aztecs, Carthage, a lot of the gods that Israel was actually around. You're offering sacrifice basically to demons because demons keep their appointments. You can sell your soul to the devil, and the devil will make you rich and powerful. It'll work. But of course, you're selling your soul, and that's horrible, but you will get practical results. So that's a very practical outlook on life. Finally, then, Chesterton says the last one is philosophy. By that he means more wisdom about how to live a good life here on earth. He names things like Buddhism, Confucianism as philosophies, not really religions. Not so much dealing with the divine, but dealing with life now.
I guess that in our current parlance, natural philosophy would sort of equate to, agnosticism or even atheism, a way of trying to find some sort of ethical balance without any kind of religious context.
Yeah, I think that's right. One thing Chester notes is that pagan myth was almost always amoral. It just wasn't concerned with morals. Like, Zeus had no effect on my day-to-day life. You could worship Zeus and then go do whatever you wanted. And he notes that also, like a lot of Hindu religions are very similar to that. You can do whatever practices you do. I just don't happen to know what those are. But they don't really make big moral claims on your life.
It's interesting to me that in our time, paganism and witchcraft are really enjoying something of a renaissance. There's a tremendous interest in the occult and the supernatural and all of that as kind of alternatives to traditional religion, especially to Christianity.
That is interesting. I've been watching that for many years now, trying to figure out what's going on there. One thing I think that's actually very helpful that Chesterton gives us here is that in the history of the world, he says there's a clash of pagan myth and witchcraft. Because he wants to defend pagan myth as almost like you're in a state of original sin. We're fallen. We're broken. Original sin corrupts our intellect, so we're not very smart. And so it's actually really hard to know God well, naturally, without revelation, in a state of original sin. And so Chesterton kind of wants to give a very positive light to pagan myth. Like, tell your cute little stories. It's not too bad, you know. You know you're ignorant about God. You don't really believe God, Zeus came down. Zeus, as in, God came down and fornicated. You don't actually believe that. So he wants to almost, defend almost like a sort of natural pleasantness to myth. And the paganism, the witchcraft version, he wants to very strongly attack as pretty evil. And he says the two of them, those came to big conflict. And this conflict was kind of symbolized in the wars between Rome and Carthage, because, of course, Carthage worships Baal. Hannibal's name is Hannibal, son of Baal, right? And so Carthage practiced human child sacrifice and stuff like that. Rome did not. And so he kind of presents the various Punic Wars with Rome's ultimate victory as the victory of good myth, so to speak, against evil witchcraft. He says that's very important, actually. If it had not been for Rome defeating Carthage, the church would have had a much harder time starting. Instead of the early church trying to convert a bunch of pagans, it would have been trying to convert a bunch of witches, and that, as in people practicing witchcraft and human sacrifice. And that would have been much harder for us, actually.
Interesting.
But I think that's helpful because it shows us that a lot of the revergence to witchcraft and paganism, pagan myth, a lot of it, I think, is a revergence more to the witchcraft side, not so much to the pagan myth side. Does that make sense? Do you think that's right?
I think you're right. I mean, we see interest in things like Wiccan philosophy or all of these pyramids or precious stones, or they're supposed to be imbued with power. That's very much a traditional witchly practice.
Yeah, everything to do with the modern idea of the occult, what we'd say occult practices, right. That would all be very much witchcraft. And it's all very obviously practical oriented. There's a reason in America today, there's apparently more women who identify as witches than people who identify as Presbyterian in all of America. And, of course, they're trying to gain some kind of power. You'll see stories around elections of a coven of witches getting together to curse the political opponent they don't like. And that's been going on since the 90s, actually.
Do you see this as a reaction to the fall-off in religious identity? We keep hearing about the nuns, the people who have no religious affiliation. Those numbers are growing all the time. At least that's what we're told in the media. Is this movement toward nature, spirituality, and all of that just a reaction to that?
I think they're definitely related. People are inherently religious. Chesterton says, and of course, Everlasting Man, that man is naturally religious. We are inclined to worship. We know we ought to worship something. And so as much as most of the nuns are, of course, rejecting Christianity, but they, of course, still want to be religious in some sense. And so what they go to is something very very much not Christian. So I think that's right. I think people are looking for religious identity and affiliation and connection with supernatural things. And also, for the ones choosing more of the witchcraft side, practical results. They want to accomplish things in this world.
Chesterton had an interesting religious journey of his own. He eventually became a Catholic convert, but how did he start?
Oh, yeah, Chesterton's journey is very interesting, very long journey, too. So he started as a child, 1880s, 1890s, at various times he was very much a socialist at times, but by the time he was mid-20s and started his writing career, he had put all the socialism behind him. For a while he was almost like a believing Catholic, but not practicing Anglican. So he wrote his famous book, Orthodoxy, where he describes why we should all be adhere to the Apostles' Creed, basically, in basic Christian morals. And that's probably his most famous book. But he didn't actually join the church, the Catholic Church, for another 15 years. And during that time, he wasn't practicing, going to Anglican church, because, of course, he was in England, so Anglican by birth. But he wasn't practicing in Anglican. So he had a very 15, 20-year period of his life where he was kind of a believer and defender of the church and Catholicism, but not actually a practitioner of it. Eventually, then, he did become Catholic and started going to regular Mass and sacraments and prayer and all that stuff. But his conversion was very much an intellectual conversion, but also intellectual conversion motivated by what he calls romance.
Well, if people are interested in looking more deeply into his thoughts, specifically in the area of comparative religion, what books of his might you recommend?
The main book that we've talked about today has been Everlasting Man. That was a famous book he wrote. It's kind of, in a way, his magnum opus, his great final work. He was full Catholic when he wrote it. It's one of his larger books. So The Everlasting Man. But also he does have a book where he details his own conversion, which is, of course, just the Catholic Church and conversion. And then so he'll explain, he does a little bit of religious comparison in there, especially what his own life was.
Matthew McKenna, Ave Maria University. Thanks very much for reflecting on Chesterton and giving us some insights into his thoughts. He certainly was one of the preeminent thinkers of the 20th century.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much.
If you've watched Father Robert Spitzer's EWTN TV show, Father Spitzer's Universe, you know how gifted this Jesuit priest is at distilling knowledge and presenting complex topics in understandable ways. A specialist in the philosophy of science and a former college president, he has the gift of being able to answer puzzling questions in ways that are clear, compelling, and faith-enhancing. Now he's offering his unique insights, along with a good deal of personal life reflection, in a new book from EWTN Publishing, titled, appropriately, Father Spitzer's Universe, Exploring Life's Big Questions. Father, thanks for being with us once again.
Great to be with you, Bill.
Is this book intended as a companion to the TV show?
Well, in a way, yes. It was meant to summarize some of the topics that come up frequently enough, and also some of the big categories that come up of questions, and we try to put it sort of in an order of the catechism so that people could see, first we talk about God and the existence of God and proofs of God, and then the Trinity, going right down the line to Jesus, and then, of course, to Jesus' real presence in the Eucharist, and trying, as we do, to bring up the scientific evidence for him, the philosophical evidence for God, let's say, and looking at near-death experiences and and the evidence for life after death. We take a look at various moral issues, too, that are very consequential, and some topics along the lines of the spiritual life. So we're trying to get kind of a Reader's Digest selection. A lot of topics, try to cover it very incisively. A kind of a quick presentation of the various questions and the themes that come up a lot during my show, Father Spitzer's Universe. And, of course, Doug Keck is posing the questions and sometimes does a lot of the follow-up questions as well.
Yeah, you certainly haven't shied from the big issues here. This is life and death and eternity, and boy, oh boy, this is the real stuff. Aside from its direct relevance to the TV series, do you see this as kind of an introduction to faith? Is it a book that somebody who might be weak in their faith or even deeply doubting might read?
Well, they could, surely, and get some benefit from it. It's more likely that a friend of such a person would be reading this book and go, oh my gosh, Joe really ought to listen to this answer. Harry's been doubting the Holy Eucharist for a long time. Give him this answer. Mary, she doesn't think there's any evidence for life after death or transphysical souls. She's basically a closet materialist, and I'll give her this answer. So the objective would be to provide a tool where, a lot of people are getting sort of bombarded with questions, and even people saying, oh, science has disproved God.
Right.
And so, of course, you could grab the answer that's right there and just give it to the person, in a Xerox copy and say, well, here's one answer. It's brief, it's incisive, but it's contemporary science and it's logical. So here it is. You can mull on this.
There does seem to be this hurdle that people have difficulty getting over. I guess it's a reflection of our time when we look at things in, practical, pragmatic terms and kind of shy from the spiritual explanations. How do you approach that? When you talk to somebody who raises those kinds of objections, what's your opening line? How do you get into that discussion?
Well, normally, when I get into those discussions, it's generally with millennials to Gen Zs. So those are the ones that are really positing these things, and they're positing them very seriously. So they really are looking, and in many cases, their faith is on a very tight string. One of the reasons is because after the Second Vatican Council, we stopped doing apologetics, and we're limping back into the apologetics. We used to be the great church of apologetics, but we just kind of let it go for a long time. And today, the crisis that faces our young people is not which church are you going to go to. Secularism is the new crisis. Let's face it. Atheism is the new crisis. That's where the pressure is coming down. Complete categorical rejection of the church's moral teaching. That's what's coming down. And the millennials and the Gen Zs are getting hit hard. They don't know how to answer these questions. We do have the answers to these questions. We have an abundance of answers from both science and philosophical logic and social scientific surveys and so forth. And we can really make a very good, rational, science-based answer to the question, and that will help them out. Now, there are a lot of people who find that interesting as well. They may not be a millennial or a Gen Z. They may find it interesting. But more often than not, a lot of people go, hey, my kid has left the church or whatever, and I'm, looking for some answers. He posed these two questions to me, and there it is right in the book. It's one of the questions that came up, and so you can just, kind of hand that answer off to the person and get them at least started and reflecting on maybe another approach that will, they just can't, say, well, I give up on religion. And so that's the main thing is to hold the line and to give parents, give teachers the kind of evidence that the younger folks, the millennials to Gen Zs, really need to have.
Well, hopefully this book can be a useful tool and serve a genuine evangelistic purpose. Where can people find out more about it and possibly get their hands on it?
Oh, yeah. First of all, of course, you can get it at the EWTN catalog, which is got it stocked. You can also get it at Sophia Press. You can get it at my website, which is magiscenter.com, MAGIS center.com. So we have a bookstore there. You can get it. And, of course, you can get it at Amazon or any of the usual suspects there, the big public online bookstores. Any of them will be carrying it.
Father Spitzer's Universe, exploring life's big questions. Thank you very much. Good talking to you again, and good luck with the book, Father.
Oh, thanks so much, Bill. Appreciate it.
The last time we spoke with Catholic talk show host Greg Schluter, he was wallowing in the pig pen with his satirical novel, The Magnificent Piglets of Pigletsville. Well, we're meeting him at a different location now with a very different scent in the air. He's got a new novel, 12 Roses. Greg, it's good to talk to you again.
Great to speak with you also, Bill. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, give us a whiff of this new literary blossom. What's the book about?
Thank you. Well, the protagonist's name is Anna. She is from a family with some cultural Catholic background, but she's estranged. She's made some decisions in her life. She's in her 20s. She thinks that finally she's met this man that she loves and she's living with, and she comes home, and this is kind of where the story begins. She discovers she's pregnant. She's hopeful of all that one might be hopeful about in this relationship, not married. She comes home, she's pregnant, she just sees a note that says, "I'm sorry," and her boyfriend, whom she had hoped to be her spouse, is gone. So that's day one. It begins on December 12th. It is a 14-day journey, but each of the 12 days leading up to Christmas, she is getting a rose mysteriously appearing with a particular word, and again, that speaks to her identity, that speaks to the lies and the confusion. And the story is really, I think, in my prayer, from a family where my mom founded Bethesda Post-Abortion Healing Ministry. It's a incredible ministry to women that she presided over for many, many years and wrote a manual used by the Sisters of Life. So I, as a child of hers, one of us 7 children, were forged with a heart to be attuned to the plight of people who found themselves in those circumstances. And not just, yes, pro-life, we want to save those unborn, so we need to be engaged politically. But this is an even deeper thing, right? This is in that realm where the battle is taking place, where women are contending with these lies and feeling hopeless. And amidst that sea of lies, the confusion, she's getting these messages, a daily message every day with a particular rose. And she battles with this, right? Like she brings to the interaction with the new rose every morning a little bit, of her battle and struggling with it. And I don't want to reveal too much, but I will say, yes, the woman, Anna, is pregnant, and that is her unique circumstance. But at the heart of this, and I preface this with the story of my own wife's parents, the plight that they faced in short form, carrying baby number 13 in her womb in 1976. My mother and father-in-law were on the bus from Erie, PA, making their way through Pittsburgh to the March for Life in the earliest years. She was only 39 years old. She had her head on her husband's shoulder, Joanna and Michael's shoulder, and God called her home in the middle of the night. She died on that bus. Those years later talked about this sad but prolific moment that defied understanding, the baby kicking in her womb as she had already passed. No real doctors on the bus who really could do anything.
Right.
For her dad, though, Michael, to come home, imagine this, to return to a family of 12 kids. He didn't make a dime, over $25,000 a year. To return to these 12 kids, ranging in age from 17 down to, I guess, Keith, my wife is number 11. Keith would have been 3 years old. To find a way to make it work. So the message, the prophetic word that my father, and I was blessed to know him the last years of his life with my marriage and our first child of our 6, the message that he left me, and this sets it up in my preface to speak to every soul. What God calls you to, he provides for. Whatever circumstance you're in, whoever's listening right now, whatever struggle you're in, financial, relational difficulty, God knows you. He loves you. And he's not going to call us to a sense of knowing him and provision without providing. So that sets it up. And then the story of Anna, but I guess I would say this. At the core of all of our battle, Anna has hers, the pregnancy situation. We all need to hear that word being spoken to us. We all need that reminder. We all need kind of that way that is more than just, right, I heard this in a podcast or a talk, but to open our hearts and to almost hear a voice from heaven in the way Juan Diego heard our Blessed Mother. In so many words, this is Our Lady of Guadalupe, who knows us, loves us, desires us to know deeply the love of the Father in Christ, who knows our current tumult politically, right, everything, and is attuned to our hearts and with a love that is unsurpassed, speaks directly to us. That's the experience. The chapters are quite short, typically 2 pages. Toward the end, there may be some longer ones, 3 or 4, but it really does have an arc. This is not a sermon in dramatic form. The faith is woven in there, but it's woven in there as a function of a truth that is applicable to all of us. As the great producer Cecil B. DeMille said, the 10 Commandments, right? He said, the moral law is not something we can break, only be broken against. Actually, Chesterton said that, and he took it and applied to the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments are not something we can so much break as be broken against. That's the cosmology. That's what I think all of us need to awaken to and recognize. The greatest malady today, in my opinion, is the enemy saying truth is something you can presume to create. You feel like you're a woman, you feel like, whatever. That's the dilemma. We need to rediscover that there's an order to love. So I'm fire hosing you, Bill, but that's more than a snapshot.
Well, I take it that the roses, this motif of the roses is sort of the thread of continuity throughout the story. Does the character Anna know who's sending her these messages?
She does not, and one discovers this, and I don't want to kind of blow the ending. I want to leave the question mark because I think that's the way it is for most of us. There's a need to kind of discover and hear the voice from on high, right? The one that's with us when we're by ourselves. The question remains, but in the question is very much a formidable answer. And I'll say for astute observers, just buying this book, which you can get on Amazon, again, 12 Roses, Twelve, Roses. If you look at the cover closely enough, in some more than just a mystical way, you'll kind of get a sense of feeling. I love that passage, is Mary's words to Juan Diego, do you not know you're in the folding of my arms? That's kind of the feel, if you will, of what I think somebody is going to experience. They're going to be drawn deeply into a sense of being in the fold of Our Lady's arms.
Well, it's an intriguing premise. I'm sure a lot of people would find it very interesting and engaging. 12 Roses, 12 Messages, One Life by Greg Schluter. Thanks very much for taking a couple minutes to tell us about this. Sounds like a really interesting book.
Thank you so much, Bill. I appreciate it.
Be with us next time when we explore other aspects of religious communication and look deeper into the great Christian heritage of free expression. Free Expression with Bill Kassel is a production of Good Shepherd Catholic Radio and Company Publications, where good books, good music, and good radio are always good company. Dan Curris provided technical assistance. Theme and incidental music are by Dan Adam. The program was produced and directed by Bill Kassel. This is Good Shepherd Catholic Radio.